Greetings! In today's video, we are taking a look at the second third, so the next 30 colors of the Rosa Gallery range. There are 90 colors in total, so I split them into 3 videos of 30 colors each. I don't really have any particular new notes for this segment of the video. I will quickly repeat the notes that I had for the first segment. The info I am giving refers mostly to the pigments in the paint. I don't necessarily address the opacity of the paint itself because there's a lot of factors to consider, but I can give you the info about the pigments in the paint, and that might help you figure out what to make of the info that comes with the paint. I also try to mention if a pigment is an organic pigment or an inorganic pigment. It's not a very intuitive notion to grasp, but in general, if you have a paint that is opaque, that is granulating, that is permanent, so that is light fast, it goes with the granulation, but a pigment that is quite heavy, and also a color that is more on the muted side, chances are this is an inorganic pigment, and they are generally made from metals. Organic pigments are bright, transparent, they're light, they have a high tinting strength, but they can also be less light fast. And for these, you can either have them from a natural source, like indigo, like madder roots, but you can also have them lab made. This is the quinacridone, the azo, the phthalo, and all of these really nice colors. These are made on a chemical level from a chain of carbon somewhere in there. Not a chemist, but that's what I got from my research. So I think that's it for the note. If there's anything else, I will put it at the end of the video, and I will get right to the paints. Our first color here that we're taking a look at is color 785 Violet Quartz. This is also one of those super interesting custom colors. It has 3 pigments. There are 2 of them that we've talked about before. So the PR177 is our anthraquinone red, and then we also have PB29, which is ultramarine blue, and then we have PV3, which is M-methyl violet, which tends to be a fugitive pigment. So it is a bit unfortunate that it's in this mix. Perhaps at some point they will replace it with a more light fast pigment, but as it is right now in this mix, we have the PV3 that's not light fast, that's a fugitive color, and then the PR177 that has really mixed results and tends to be not the most light fast. A very beautiful color, but one to keep in mind that if you put it in the sun, it's gonna change. Next we have 710 Violet, single pigment paint made from PV23, which is our dioxazine violet that I've talked about in the previous video, but it is generally a super nice, transparent staining, very good tinting strength. Like you can see, this one is one of the best versions of this pigment that I've seen because it is extremely dark in the mass tone. It is so deep. And then, you know, you can dilute it with water, so you can basically go from this darkest dark to the most light of purple values, which is amazing. This is what I like of watercolor, is this range of values that you have access to. So a really beautiful version of this pigment here. We are switching color group. This is our first green, 713 olive green, made from 3 pigments, PG17, which we saw earlier as well, chrome oxide green, an inorganic pigment that is quite opaque, a slightly muted green. Then we have PY1 here, which is Hansa Yellow G. This one is an organic pigment, and it is it is reported as being awfully not light fast in watercolor, which is a shame. That's a bit of a bother. And then we have PBK7, which is lamp black. This is another inorganic pigment. It is opaque to semi-opaque depending. It is a black pigment with brown undertones. So that's what sort of differentiates it from ivory black. Lamp black is the one with the slightly warmer undertones. It's a black pigment with a medium level of staining and a very good tinting strength. 728 Sap Green. Now this color, I don't think there's a range out there that doesn't have a color named sap green. It is sort of a remnant of the color lineups from a long time ago. I don't think you can really find genuine sap green as a paint anymore, or it's really hard to do. So most sap green paints are a mix of different pigments. In our case here, we have 3 pigments. So we have PY110, which we saw in the previous video. This is isoindolinone yellow, a really beautiful warm yellow pigment. Then we have PG7. This is our first time encountering this ubiquitous pigment. It is phthalocyanine green blue shade, an organic pigment. So it is a transparent color. It has excellent light fastness. This one heavily staining. This color is so staining. And also it's another one of those that has the overpowering tinting strength, meaning that if you mix with this color, you have to be careful about how much of this PG7 you add in your mix, because it will overpower the other colors in the mix. And last color we have here is PBK6, which is carbon black. This one can have brown or blue undertones. It is another one of those inorganic pigments, so metal pigment. In the case of this color here, it is definitely what makes it a bit more muted, because we have our nice warm yellow, our cool green, so they mute each other a little bit already, but with the black you add the extra level of bringing this color down a notch in terms of its saturation. Color 754, mint. It's a mix of two pigment that we saw, so PG7 that I just talked about, phthalocyanine green blue shade, and then PW6, our white titanium pigment. So this is a tint. It is a color mixed with white, but as with the previous two tints that we saw, it is still quite a vibrant color. They don't make the ratio of the white pigment high to the point where we lose the vibrancy of the green in there. Instead, we end up with a really nice minty color. I mean, this is the right name for this color, and it is beautiful. It is really, really nice. Color 711, green. Now, there's a bit about this one. The pans that I have are PG8. This is pigment nitroso green. It is an organic pigment, so it is a transparent color. It is a staining color with a good tinting strength. As a pigment, it is not the most light fast of color, and apparently this pigment is no longer produced. That's the kind of thing that as a paint maker puts you in a pickle. So Rosa Gallery is rolling out a different formulation for this color that will be made from 3 pigments. So the alternative will be made from PG7, PR101, and PY151. If I ever manage to get one of those new versions of the pan, I will make a little video comparing them, but so far I've only been able to get the old formulation, the single pigment one. 776, cobalt green medium. This one is made from pigment PG26 that again we saw in the previous batch of colors. PG26 is cobalt chromite green. So here we have this color as a single pigment paint, and you can see the granulation, the slightly muted color, the opacity. So definitely this is an inorganic pigment. It is a really beautiful color and a lot of fun to use in mixes. 786, green quartz. So we had violet quartz earlier. This is sort of the same kind of vibe. It is a custom mix, a color that has a lot of character. It has granulation, it has hue shifts. It is really, really nice. I really like this one. So in this one, we have pigments PB29, ultramarine blue that we saw earlier, PG26 that I just talked about. That's our cobalt chromite green. And then we have a new color, introducing PY150, nickel azo yellow. This one you will probably hear a lot about, if not through me, through someone else, because it is one of those sort of key color. It is a really nice, beautiful, transparent yellow. It is an organic color, so you have a color that's transparent, it has excellent light fastness, good tinting strength, staining, all of that. So in the case of this mix, we have two colors that are possibly granulating to some level, the blue and the green, which is why when you dilute this color, and even at mass tone, but diluted, you see the yellow poking through. And this specific yellow is really glowy. It is a beautiful, super intense yellow. So to have it in a mix really brings a lot of interesting effects to the paint. 743, chromium oxide. This is made from a single pigment PG17. We saw it in a mix in the previous batch. As you can see, it is quite a nice granulating color, slightly muted green with a degree of opacity in there. It's a really interesting color that will bring a lot to your mixes. And we have another super interesting color here, a bit like green quartz that I talked about. This is another one of those custom mixes. This is jade green, color 766. It is made from 3 pigments. So in there we have PB28, which is cobalt blue, our first time encountering cobalt blue so far. This is another one of those inorganic pigment, and then that means that you have a color that's granulating, that has an excellent light fastness, and that is slightly opaque as well. Mixed with it, we have 2 other inorganic pigments. We have PBK7, so that's lamp black, and then PY42, that's our synthetic yellow iron oxide. So basically what we have here is a mix of 3 pigments that are more on the opaque side, more on the granulation side of things, So we end up with a color that is very strong in the mass tone, but has a really stark granulation. And when you dilute it, you don't really have one of those transparent staining pigments to make for a base hue in there. So when you dilute it, you don't reveal anything new about this paint, but you still get all this granulation and all this character from the pigments that are in there. So it's a really interesting color as well. 755 Aureolin Green. This is one of the colors that first called to me when I investigated the Rosa Gallery range. I really like this color. It is a bit like green gold, but it is made from two pigments. So we have PY 150 in there, Nickel Azo Yellow, that I talked about just a few colors ago. And then we also have PG7. So we have two colors that are staining, transparent, have a high tinting strength, and they mix together to create this really nice glowy green that is a tiny bit muted, but at the same time that is also very rich. 739 Bright Green. This one is somewhat similar in concept to Aureolin Green that we just saw. It is a mix of two pigments. We have a yellow, we have a green in there, so we end up with a green, but as you can see, it is a much more sort of spring green, new shoot green. It is very bright. It is not a very natural looking color in my opinion, but I think it's a very good color if you do a lot of greenery, plants and all of that, or even veggies. So in there we have two pigments. We have PY 151, which again has been introduced earlier in this series. This is Benzimidazolone Yellow, H4G, and our secondary color in there is PG7, phthalocyanine green blue shade. So we end up with this really interesting green that you can see the mix of the two colors in there, but since we're mixing two transparent colors, as you dilute this color, you don't see the colors separate or anything. They're really mixed together. Color 712 Emerald Green. This is a naming convention, quote unquote, that is really frequent for this color. So this pigment is PG7 on its own. Our phthalocyanine green blue shade, pure. And it is a really intense color. I've talked about it a bit already, but it is transparent. It is excessively staining. It is overpowering in mixes. And you can see the color like on the screen. The mass tone is really intense. And as you dilute it, you still get a lot of punch to this color. It's not a very natural looking color, but it is so good in mixes. You can make so many beautiful colors mixing this with something else. So it's a color that is on most palettes, and sometimes it can be difficult to figure out what to do with it, but just do the exercise of mixing your PG7 with your other colors, and you will probably find a mix somewhere in there that you wouldn't have thought would happen, but that is absolutely beautiful. 767 Azure Green, another one of those custom colors, custom mixes of two pigments. So we have PB15 colon 3, new color, phthalocyanine blue BG5. So this is the variant of this pigment. There's quite a few variants to PB15, but the PB15 colon 3 one is slightly more greenish. As a pigment, it is an organic pigment. It is heavily staining. It is another one of those overpowering tinting strengths. This is the color that if you drop it somewhere, it's gonna stay there forever. No matter how much you try to wash it off, your best bet would be to spread the rest of the paint on the item that got stained, and now you have a blue version of that item. And that's it. It is a really beautiful color, another one of those where a little goes a really long way. And in this color, in this Azure Green, it is mixed with PG17, which is our chrome oxide green. So we have the transparent, super powerful blue mixed with a more muted granulating green. So in the mass tone, you have this teal color that's really quite strong and quite punchy. But when you dilute the color, then you have a really subtle play between the granulating green and the blue, and it makes for a beautiful effect, a truly beautiful color. Color 780 Royal Green. This is quite a recent addition to the range, and it is made from two pigments. We have PB15 colon 3 that I just talked about, phthalocyanine blue BG5, so that's the greenish one, and then PR101 that we talked in the first segment. This is synthetic iron oxide red. Now, Rosa Gallery has quite a few paints made with PR101 as a single pigment, and I did the test. I was curious about it, how I could replicate this beautiful, moody, muted green. And from my tests, they mixed two of their colors, or you can get it from mixing two of their colors. If you mix their bright blue and then their burnt sienna together, you will get a color that is close to this one. Royal Green on its own is a color that's quite reminiscent of Perylene Green, but that doesn't end up being quite as flat, especially when diluted. I find that some Perylene Greens tend to sort of be really gray and flat when you dilute them, but I feel like this one being a mix of a blue and a red, you have this depth depth that shines through when you dilute the color. Color 741, Cobalt Turquoise. This is one of my favorite color when it comes to paints. This is not a color that I go to in anything else but paint, but when we get to paints, this color is amazing. It is glowy, it has a lot of character, a lot of texture. It is not a very strong color in terms of tinting strength, but it is really good in mixes. It makes for this separation and you can get really beautiful purples, really striking greens. It is a really fun color to paint with. So the one we have here, color 741 Cobalt Turquoise, it is made from pigment PB28, pigment blue 28. So it can be a bit surprising because we saw this pigment in a color before and we will probably see it in the coming color. And it's one of those that can have multiple hues. So in the case of Cobalt Turquoise, we have a really aqua version of this pigment. It is more green, it is less blue, and it's what makes this color really, really interesting. Color 714 Turquoise. This is another one of those mixes that you kind of find a version of in most ranges. It mixes two very transparent, very staining, very strong colors together. Our PB15 color 3, phthalocyanine blue PG5, and PG7 phthalocyanine green blue shade. So you have a bluish green with a greenish blue. We end up with this teal color. Now, this one is incredibly transparent, incredibly staining. You have a good range of values from the mass tone to the diluted color, and it stays the same throughout. You don't have any variation in the color itself as you dilute it. Color 750 Royal Blue. So it is a mix of three pigments, our ultramarine blue, PB29, so a slightly more purplish blue, mixed with two white pigments, so zinc white and titanium white. What do we get when we mix a pigment with white? We get a tint. I think this is our sixth tint so far or something like that. And again, we have another one that is still quite strong in terms of hue. It is not completely muted flat by the white pigment. Like the ratio again is really good and we end up with a color that's a bit like periwinkle. It's really, really nice, really soft, beautiful. You have a teeny tiny bit of texture when you look at it more diluted, but it's a really fun color and they really found a way to make this color mix with white something really interesting rather than just a sort of faded quote-unquote pastel color. 752 Cerulean Blue, introducing a new pigment, PB36. So this is cobalt chromite as a pigment. It is an inorganic pigment, so this is why we have a color that's a tiny bit less strong, that is more opaque, that has some granulation in it. It is a color that's excessively light fast, as most colors that are considered inorganic, and it is another one of those colors that work really well in mixes, and I really like this one for skies. It's a really interesting color. 716 Cobalt Blue. Now this one is PB28 also, so it is technically the same pigment as the Cobalt Turquoise we saw just a few colors ago, but you can see this one is a really blue color and the other one was a aqua color, but they're the same pigment. With most colors, you can't figure out what a color is going to look like just from the color code. You can have an idea, but there are so many variations in hues that all have the same pigment code that truly there's no way to know what you're gonna get. But here we have PB28 in a much more blue version. This one is not excessively granulating, has a tiny bit of granulation, but it's still somewhat transparent and it is a really beautiful blue color that's a little bit less intense than ultramarine, but also quite similar in hue to ultramarine blue, which is our next color. Color 715 Ultramarine, made from PB29, ultramarine blue pigment. We saw this one in the previous batch. Again, I'm sorry, but as we go through all of these, there's more and more colors that will be callbacks to other colors that we've seen previously. So PB29, beautiful color, beautiful pigment. It is an inorganic pigment and you can have it with some variations. You can have it slightly more green, slightly more purple, or slightly more red. And then you can also have levels of granulation that will vary depending on how fine the pigment is molded. If you keep the particles somewhat coarse, you're going to get more granulation, and if you make them really, really fine, you're going to have less granulation. So in this case, if I compare this one with the color that we have just after, I feel like this one is the tiniest bit more grain, and the granulation seems to be quite similar, but it's a bit difficult to tell. But it's a really beautiful ultramarine color. It's one of those basic color that you kind of need in any palette. It is a really handy color to have, even if you don't don't use it on its own. In mixes, it's a lot of fun. And our next color, 777, is Ultramarine Spectral. So again, same pigment, PB29, but this one is a tiny bit more red or more purple. It has the same kind of really intense mass tone, and then you dilute it and you get the granulation that shows up a bit more. Seems to be just about the same level of granulation as the previous one, at least on my swatch. But yeah, this one is just a tiny bit different in hue. Color 782, Royal Blue. And you're gonna say, wait, Royal Blue? Why does that sound familiar? It's because we had a color previously that was also named Royal Blue. This is a little issue that a lot of people picked up on when looking at the Rosa Gallery range as a whole. This one, this Royal Blue 782, is a recent addition to the range. It's one of their newest colors, but in translation from Ukrainian to English, something didn't quite make it, or it was not possible to translate it in a way that made sense. But anyway, we have two colors named Royal Blue. Now, a friend of the channel was able to contact Rosa Gallery and ask them about it, and apparently the previous color that we saw, the tint, is gonna be renamed Royal Blue Light, and this one will remain just Royal Blue, which makes sense in a way because this color right now that we're looking at, 782, is the color that most people will associate with Royal Blue. When we think of Royal Blue, this is the kind of color most people will envision, and Royal Blue Light, well, it's fitting for the other one. Now, this color, let's talk about this color. It is made from pigment PB1, pigment blue 1, which is Victoria Blue. It is a transparent pigment. It is incredibly beautiful as a color, but it is a fugitive pigment, and that's where the issue is with this one. So when exposed to UV light, UV rays, this color will darken apparently. But it is really beautiful, but it will darken. So again, that's when you have to decide what you want to do about this color. If you want to use it and just be mindful of where you put the painting, or if you just don't want to use it because of the fact that this pigment is fugitive. The color on its own is amazing. It's a bit like if you had a really transparent ultramarine blue, but that will go as dark as Indanthrone blue. So it is really dark, intense, beautiful, slightly purplish blue with no texture to it. It is a really nice color. It's also a pigment that you don't see from a lot of brands, probably because of its light fastness. But at the same time, if you don't really put your artwork on the walls and you scan it, it's a really fun color to have for painting. Color 779, Prussian Blue. This is another one of those ubiquitous pigments. Most palettes have this pigment. It is PB27. Interestingly enough, this is the first time we encountered this pigment so far. So this pigment, even though it is quite a transparent, deep color that doesn't have any granulation to it, it is still an inorganic pigment because of the way it is produced. We have a really deep blue with greenish undertones that is quite staining, that has a good tinting strength. It can vary in transparency, but it is generally semi-transparent. The only issue it has is the light fastness. There's been a lot of tests of this color and the results always vary, but in general, this is not the most light fast of pigment. 718, Blue, pretty straightforward. This one is made from pigment PB15, which is phthalocyanine blue. If you compare this one to, again, the next color, bright blue, they're both PB15. The next one is PB15 column 3. If you look at them both, the one that I'm holding right now, the 718 blue PB15, leans a bit more towards the purple or the red, so it's a bit more warm in that sense, but it is still the same kind of really transparent, really strong, high tinting strength, staining color that is super useful in mixes as well. And then next color, 729, bright blue. Again, phthalocyanine blue color, but this one is the one that's slightly greenish. So you get both, which is super handy for mixes. You can really fashion your mixes to get the result you want by having these options in there. Color 762, azure blue. So we had azure green earlier, now we have azure blue. What they have in common is the PB15 column 3 pigment, but this one also has PG26 in it, which is cobalt chromite green. So a slightly bluish, slightly muted granulating green. Our PB15 column 3, so our slightly greenish intense blue. And then we also have PBK7, which is lamp black. That brings in this darker granulation. So you have the green, the black with the granulation, and then the bright blue for the undertone color. So it's a really interesting, super moody blue, but that doesn't fall flat because you have that super saturated blue in the mix that really comes up when you dilute this color. At mass tone, it looks like an indigo, and then when you dilute it, you get a play of color that is really interesting. 738, blue indanthrene. This is pigment pigment blue 60, so PB60. It is pigment indenthrone blue, so it is an organic pigment, which means we have a very transparent color that is staining, it has a high tinting strength, and it is really, really nice, to be honest. So this one is light fast, so if you want a deep, intense, transparent blue, but don't want to get the PB1, the royal blue we saw a bit earlier, you want to get something that's light fast, this is a good option. It is a really nice color. It is super deep, very dark in the mass tone, but then you dilute it and you get a really nice deep blue. It's just a teeny tiny bit muted when you dilute it, I feel like, but it is really beautiful. Makes super good greens. If you mix that with any kind of green or any kind of yellow, you get something really interesting with that. Because it is so deep, it has a lot of values and it brings that into any mix you make with this color. As a pigment, it has a red shade and a green shade, so you have a slightly more green version and a slightly more red version. I couldn't say about this one, but it is beautiful. 778 indenthrone gray. So I have questions about this color. On the documentation, it is the same pigment as the really smooth single hue color we just saw, the blue indenthrone. But here we have a very different color that looks to be almost black in the mass tone, and then when you dilute it, you get some dark granulation in there and the blue comes through as well. So I don't know what kind of sorcery we have going on here, but I really like this color. I think it's amazing. It's a bit like if you had a granulating Payton's gray. It is, to say the least, quite unique and a really, really nice color from this range. And the last color of this batch, color 717, indigo. I feel like we get a really good indigo from Rosa Gallery. This is a bit of a benchmark color. I feel like when you compare the indigos of various brands, you can get a feel for how creative they were when concocting this color. Natural indigo is not light fast. It is made from plants, and any paint that is made from a plant will not be light fast as a general rule. But this one, we have 3 pigments in here, and I feel like they balance them to give us a really beautiful color that is almost black in the mass tone, but then dilutes evenly to a really nice muted blue color, like a blue-gray. Really beautiful. So we have a new pigment in here. We have our PB15:1. Again, a phthalocyanine blue. This is the 3rd one. This one is the red shade one, so it's the one that's going to be a bit more purple. Phthalocyanine blue, it's an organic pigment, so it is deep, intense, transparent, super staining, super tinting. It is a great, great, great color. But here we have it mixed with PV19, which we saw a long time ago. I'm kidding. But this is our quinacridone violet pigment, and we haven't seen a quinacridone pigment in a bit, but it is in there quite subtly because you don't really see any kind of violet pink coming through, but it's in there. And then we also have PPK7, which is our lamp black. In this case, it seems to be molded quite fine because you don't really get any kind of granulation that's very visible. So when you mix all of these together, you get this deep, really lovely deep blue color that is unparalleled so far in this range. And that's the second batch of Rosa Gallery colors. Let me know what you think of these. Let me know if you've tried any of these. Let me know if you have a favorite. I love when we have a bit of a chat in the comments, and it's always a lot of fun to talk about paints with like-minded people. So really, let me know. And I should be back next week with the remaining 30 colors. So we will go through these. Like I said, as we progress through the colors, there is less and less new pigments to introduce. When I first did my research for these, I counted about 40 different pigments within the whole range. So yeah, as we go through the colors, well, there's less and less new pigments, but hopefully you can still get some good info from me going through these colors, even if I don't go through each pigment every single time. So yeah, enough yapping for me. See ya all next week. And in the meantime, thank you so much for watching and take care. Bye bye.